Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. Every episode is different. Every guest episode is different. So today we'll be talking to a co-founder and developer who has founded an interesting business, and he's going to share his business with us. He's going to share tech tips with us and everything. So our guest today is Krish Palaniapan. Krish is the founder of SnowPal, and he's a developer. So he's well versed in Golang, Ruby, TypeScript, Flutter, Java, and what and whatnot. So he's going to share a lot of things with us. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me here. Much appreciated. Yeah.
You're welcome. So can you tell us a bit about SnowPal and about yourself so the guests can understand where we're going?
Sure. Happy to. So my name is Krish. I live west of Washington, D.C. Been here most of my life at this point. I run a software startup in the DC metro area. The name of the company is SnowPal. We have been in business for several years. We started out building web applications and mobile applications. Our products are currently used by thousands of customers. This year, we also entered the business-to-business B2B market and launched our APIs as backends as services. So other companies that need to build these solutions like web apps or mobile apps or microservices can actually integrate our backends and create their systems and solutions much quicker. So our aim is essentially to reduce the time to market for other companies that are building software solutions.
Amazing. So as a technical founder, what unique challenges have you faced in starting and scaling your SaaS company, and how have you overcome them?
Cool. When we started the business, I've been building software for like almost 2 decades at this point, right? But when I started the business, I was like, okay, you've done this many times. You work for different companies of different sized companies, right? I work for really, really large product companies and pretty small product companies as well. Like literally one person companies where people have come to me with this amount of money and say, Krish, can you help me build something, right? To working with really large product organizations. So I had that experience, but I still, in my mind as an engineer, I was like, do I have the skills? Can I build what I'm trying to build here, right? Am I, is it reasonable to build what I'm expecting to build with the time, money, and resources that I would have at that point? So my primary concern, and I might almost say my exclusive concern, was engineering related, right? From a technical standpoint. I've done it many times, but can I do it, in a different capacity, right? That was my sort of concern, fear, whatever else you want to add there as an adjective, right? But fast forward many years, I can tell you now that turned out to be, sure, it is challenging to build software, right? It's not easy, but that turns out that is not the most difficult thing, because sometimes some things come a little bit more naturally to you than other things. True. And you don't exactly know what those things are, right? You discover as you live life. So I figured, okay, even though to myself, it was like stating the obvious, like, okay, I've been building software that should reasonably come naturally, but I'd never recognized that fact. But fast forward so many years, when we have these products out in production, Peter, I can tell you that as we're getting into sales and trying to reach out to people and prospecting, you need to have something to sell, right? If you don't have anything, you cannot sell that. But when you have something, how do you sell it? Who do you sell it to? What do you sell? How do you sell? And who do you sell it to? All of them are very difficult questions. And to me, if I have to categorize the list of challenges we have as a startup that's very ambitious, that has a lot of products in production, it's essentially sales and marketing, right? Because that is not something, I was in college for many years. I did so many credits in sales and marketing. So I was like, you know what? How difficult can that be, right? I now know how difficult it is. It's extraordinarily difficult, right? Now, every day when we build something, it's almost like when we're taking time off from our day, it's almost like a de-stress or a stress reliever is building software, because That's much easier for us. But now when we have to start one part of the day, we are actually spending time prospecting and reaching out to people and sending that email and drafting it and even reaching out, podcasters, just yourself to collaborate. It's been just sort of having to step outside the comfort zones to asking people for help and saying, hey, would you be interested in hosting me, or would you like to check this out? Those I would say those look like simple questions and a few words put together strong in a sentence, but to actually exercise that and execute it, to me has been phenomenally challenging, and it continues to be challenging, right? Every single day I talk to somebody, they say, have you done this from a sales standpoint? Have you done that from a sales standpoint? I was like, no, we didn't know that there was like 95 things to do. I wish everything was like engineering. It's quantitative, right? It's like binary, right?
True.
This is how you do it. This is the problem. This is how you architect. This is how you implement it. But unfortunately, sales is a lot of art, right? There's a lot of nuance to it, and it's something we'll have to learn. And I think, to me, what I would think is, if you're starting a company, I think you should do it. Never wait, because the best time was yesterday. But now, since that's gone, the next best time is today. But brace yourself for things that you don't expect in terms of challenges, right? That's the only thing I think personally that's been our journey so far. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
I can really, really relate with you because I'm an introverted person. I think I'm more of a technical person than a salesperson too. So it's always, when I talk on the phone, when I talk to prospects on the phone and all that, it looks natural and all that, but honestly, my happy place is just being on my own hand in front of my computer. So I can
Completely
100%
understand
relate.
Yeah, because it's like you have the space. You have the space to think and then be honest, and you make the mistake and you recover from that mistake. But when you're talking to other people, it's also understanding the culture. We are on a call, like a sales call. Predominantly, we're trying to sell to companies in the US, but we're also reaching out to companies in Europe and other parts of the world. I've done some travel over the years, but not extensive travel, right? It's not like you're the Mark Queens of travels, right? So you understand cultures by people you've met here. America has people from all over the world, which is awesome. So we do get exposed to those cultures, but it's not like traveling, right? It's not close. I mean, it's being in a country is extremely different from meeting people from that country. And now when you're on a call trying to pitch and make a point, there's a lot of other factors that come into play. And we realize that, okay, selling is challenging. Selling anything is challenging. Selling software is even more challenging. And it's challenging enough to sell it to people who are co-located in your part of the world. And now when you expand the horizons and go sell it everywhere else, it brings another new set of challenges, right? So there's no dearth of that stuff. Yeah.
Really true. So when you try to sell to business customers, how do you communicate your value proposition, especially for the non-technical people? Because when we speak these things, JavaScript, this, it just goes over their heads. So what works in communicating the value proposition?
Another great question, right? I'll give you the answer to what has sort of started to work. There will come a day where I can definitively tell you, hey, Peter, this is what exactly worked. We are not there yet. So I can tell you what is beginning to work in some small form or shape, right? First, trying to understand a little bit, we have like 30, there's a lot of challenges, right? The first thing is you have 30 minutes. Now, time is always a constraint, right? It's almost like, I know none of us have infinite time. We all have a definitive time on planet Earth to begin with. But when you scope it down to this meeting, you have 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour. And some of us are less succinct than other people, right? Now, that's just inherently, right? I'm a very chatty person. It's just me. It's just, you like people, you tend to speak a lot. And when you're working from home and doing it remotely, and you get the chance and opportunity to speak with somebody, you don't stop speaking unless they hang up the phone, right? That's kind of what it is. So now you have the 30-minute window and your mind, the clock is ticking. It's almost like taking the standardized GRE or the GMAT, exams that folks take to come to travel to different countries and study, right? You have the 30 minutes and you're like, what do I do in the 30 minutes? How do I break this down into 30 minutes? Because, you cannot I initially thought that I could let the conversation organically take shape, like start here, go somewhere else, and then come to the start, the middle, and the finish. But unfortunately, the first few meetings I was on, I would start and I would be at the 30th minute. I never got to the middle or the finish, right? And then you realize, okay, I need to do this completely differently, right? And then you figure what to do. The thing I do these technical podcasts, Peter. So, but it's solo podcast, right? Like I talk technical stuff, and
Yeah.
I've that has helped me a little bit, I should say, because I try to start the video saying I want to do it within the 10 minutes, right? And I think LinkedIn had like a 10-minute limit. I'm not sure if they have it at this point, but they used to have that limit to post these videos. So if it goes beyond the 10th minute, you now have to take it to Final Cut Pro, edit, do the editing, and do all of that stuff before you post it. Now, if you're a small company with you're doing 200 things, you don't want to spend too much time with editing, because no matter what processes Apple's selling, it still takes time to actually transcode, create that artifact, the MP4 file or the MOV files, right? So I try to keep it to 10 minutes in those podcasts, and that gave me some context to time. How do I go to this meeting and have this conversation, right? So the very first problem that I think I had to personally address was, how do I break the 30 minutes in the meeting? It could be 15-minute segments, it could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour. Depending on that, I break it down into, say, 3 parts, right? The beginning, the middle, and the end, or something of that nature. And now you figure, let's take the first 2 to 3 minutes to sort of understand the party on the other side, right? If it's one-on-one, it's slightly different and it's a little bit easier. I take 2 minutes to understand what Peter's background is, what Peter's interests are, and what Peter's problems could be that I could possibly help solve, right? But what if there are like 4 Peters on the call? Sometimes you have a sales call with like 4 people on the call, and you have no way to kind of understand, because each one has their own role. And some of them have quite a role. They're taking notes and things of that nature while somebody else is actively talking. So I think the first 5 minutes is the most challenging of the remaining 25 minutes, right? Have a good read, make your best case judgments to figure, okay, you know what, Peter's done development. Maybe he's done development recently, or maybe some time ago. Maybe he's into management. He's a senior director now. So let me switch gears. Let me not go into the level of detail that Peter would know to fix a bug, but let me just say, hey, there are bugs, there could be enhancements or features, and not skim the surface, but only go as deep as it might make sense in the context of that conversation, right? That is the second challenge. And the third one I'll tell you is, even before that meeting happened, right? How do you set the foundation for that meeting? What did you have Peter come to that meeting? What expectations does Peter come to that meeting with? Did I set the expectations correctly? Did I communicate the expectations correctly, right? But you can do your best as somebody who's prospecting, but I figured no matter what it is, you get like 300 characters sometimes when you reach out on LinkedIn and other places, right?
Yeah.
How much can I tell Peter about what SnowPal does? It's 300 characters already, right? So I need to just tell you enough about us so it piques your interest, and you're like, hey, you know what? Should we have a conversation, right? And getting that first conversation is a Herculean task, right? I wouldn't have known this 3 months ago. I'd be like, you know what, Peter, I can help you build the stuff. And Peter's like, great, Krish, I'd love to work with you. Let's get started, write the contract, right? And then you realize the reality is very detached from that hypothetical that I just threw out there, right? And then you realize, okay, we need to first get somebody's interest to have them get on the call. Let's not send a 7-paragraph email, because my very first prospecting email, like from 4 months ago, I think it told you everything about me and the company, right? Like it was like 6 paragraphs. And then I read somewhere that people on an average spend about 10 to 12 seconds on an email before they make a call on it, right? They're like, hey, you know what? If in the 10th second, by the 10th second, it did not pick my interest, I'm not interested in this. That's gone, right? So you have the 8 to 10 second window, maybe 10 to 12 second window, before which you have to captivate them. But the thing is, you're not selling a movie here, right? You're not selling entertainment. So, I mean, software is awesome, but I don't know if it's necessarily captivating to everybody, right? I find absolute pleasure and beauty in code that we write. But when I take that code and explain how beautiful it is, people have even asked me the question, the use of the word beautiful in the context of code. But to me as a developer, right, it is beautiful or it is not beautiful. Sometimes the code doesn't look pretty at all. I'm like, how can we manage this code, right? This design, this architecture. But that's how it resonates. So if you're selling entertainment, sure, it's got other challenges, but you got the help of actors and script writers and all the great talented people. But with engineering, you only have the help of all of us boring engineers. I mean, we're not that boring, sorry, but we're not as entertaining, if you will, right? So those are
Exactly.
some of the challenges that we go with to that initial meeting. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So a lot of founders, a lot of people have ideas for different apps, for different startups, and you've mentioned earlier that you've built a couple of them. So when you're building, how do founders evaluate what technology, language, framework, or platform they should build on? What criteria matter the most?
Okay. I will tell you what should matter, but I'll also tell you what seems to sometimes matter, because people always have to watch out for what seems to matter but what shouldn't really matter, right? I'll give you, and all of these are practical pragmatic examples, because I don't have to manufacture any of these here, because Peter, we've been doing this literally for several years and have products out there in production, right? So one way that I've seen companies do is, hey, you know what, Krish and Peter are two developers in the company. Peter is like a Golang developer. Krish is let's say a Golang developer as well, right? Now you can build your software, you can build your backend system using Go, no problems, right? But what if that is not the right way to solve that problem? You know what they say, right? If you have a hammer, everything is a nail, or something along those lines, right? So
True.
sometimes I've seen that companies make decisions based on the existing availability of resources, which is understandable. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong at all, right? Which is that's common sense to use resources that you have to build what you need to solve. Makes complete sense. But there are times when the technology may not be the right selection for you, right choice for you. If you're building it for yourself, that's one way to do it. But if you're building a solution or an application for some other client, right? Because let's say you separate product companies from service companies, right? Let's say we build software for ourselves to run our own products, but we also build software for other people like clients who come to us for help. How you make the decision on technologies is going to have to be quite varied between these two scenarios, right? When you make decisions for your own product, the existing resources can play a fairly significant role. But if Peter comes to me as a client and you explain your problem to me, Peter, like, hey, here is what I want to build. I want to build this mobile solution, yada, yada, yada. This is what it needs to do. Now, in my mind, I'll be like, okay, do you need for that to run on Android and iOS, or is it just Android, for instance, right? And if you want to run on both platforms, how much time and money and effort do you want to spend building the app on multiple platforms? Now, if you have a reasonable amount of money and time, or infinite amounts of it, right, then the answer becomes easier, but that's not the reality of the world we live in. You're going to be like, yep, I actually wanted to run on both platforms, but maybe I want to start out with like Android platforms, right? Because I know a lot of the mobile companies, a fair number of them from what I've seen in India, for instance, when I'm reaching out to people, iOS is a priority. This is again my speculation based on what I've
Yeah.
seen, right? This is not like empirical data, so to speak. It's based on conjecture, if you will, right? I've seen that a lot of the companies want to build it on Android first. And then once they have a market, they find traction, then they are willing to build it on iOS, for instance, which could also be because the number of phones in India as a market, there's far fewer iPhones compared to Android devices, right? So it makes complete sense. So now that is an answer in itself, right? But let's flip the coin and come back to this other part of the world. If you are building a mobile app in the US, and if you wanted to just build it on one platform, Android is going to be the unlikely platform, right? I think iOS is going to be almost the obvious choice. So therein lies the difference, right? Now that tells you, in this case, that is going to dictate the technology to you. Hey, if I only wanted on iOS to begin with, or if I only wanted on Android to begin with, right? But let me make this a little bit more complicated, right? You want to start out with one, but you eventually want to support all platforms, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
natural to be greedy to serve the world. If that is your choice, then you figure, do I go with Swift and Kotlin and build it using the native OS languages? Or do I pick cross-platform languages like Flutter or React Native or things of that nature, right? So the requirement should drive the choice of technologies as much as possible. Yes, your resources, yes, the money you have, yes, the time, all of those are factors, right, into the equation. But what weightage do you give to each of these factors? I think it's extremely important because that sort of separates, makes the difference and the distinction between a project being successful and a project being not so successful.
Amazing. All right. So while doing the research for this episode, I went through your GitHub and I saw a lot of green there. So it brings me to this next question. For technical founders, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of technical founders prefer coding because, like you said, it's predictable. It's 1 plus 1 is 2. So in terms of priorities, we all know that without sales, there'll be no, it will be difficult for the business to survive. So how do you advise that technical founders balance the technical part, that is coding, with other parts of the startup, marketing, getting the word out and things like that?
Wow, these are absolutely phenomenal questions, right? And I'm glad I'm on this podcast a few months after, because meaning if I were on this call like 4 months before, my answers wouldn't have been, not that these answers are going to be anywhere near perfect, but they would have been not even as good as I hope this is if it were 4 months ago, because we've been doing this actively, right? The sales part for the last 3 months. So I can tell you that as somebody who's getting started with, right? And I can tell you with some concrete examples, Peter, because I worked with a client of mine where the founder happened to be an extremely smart person, but not a coder, right? So that was a beautiful example for me to actually see what the differences could have possibly been. Now, the thing is, when you're starting to build something and you don't have much money or any money, all that you have is a little bit of skill to build it. The natural starting point is you're going to have to do a lot of the work yourself, right? You're going to have to play a lot of the roles. You're going to have to be, there's no fancy titles, right? The titles really may not mean much, because you're going to have to be the systems engineer. You're going to have to be the developer, the tester, the founder. You have to be the person cleaning a desk or whatever else is required to get the job done, right?
Yeah.
I think if you did not, I'll speak to it from my perspective, right? If I were not a coder, I would either have not gotten into the business of what I'm doing right now as a founder of a company. I would have probably done something else maybe, or if I did want to continue building software, but I was not a coder, I would have had to approach the problem extremely differently, right? In other words, taking much smaller bites. Now, there's pros and cons of being an engineer who's actually a founder, right? The pros, in my opinion, are you're sort of self-sufficient to a large extent, at least initially, right? You hit the ground running, you just need a machine, you start coding and blah, blah, open source, and you can start developing stuff. But the thing is, just because you're able to do something, you're going to do it. And what I mean by that is, you sometimes don't ask yourself if you should even be doing it. By you, I don't mean the person. By you, I mean the company, right? Because if I look back on some of the features we built on our first application in the very first version, Peter, it is almost preposterous that we would actually have tried to build that in version 0.0.1, for instance, right? At this point, I would say we should have done 1/10 of what it started to decided to do, pushed it out to production, figured what happened, got some responses, got some feedback, get some feedback, and then go build the next feature, right? We actually said, you know what, we want to build a very robust, solid project management platform. What does it take to build it? And, as we go into it, I can get into the details of that. But the short of it is we built way more than what I honestly believe we should have built in the first version. And that's because as an engineer, as a developer, it's another method, it's another class, it's another repo. So you just keep typing,
Yeah.
and you do it, right? You don't stop for a second to ask yourself, wait a minute, let's pause and figure out, what did we build so far? How well does it work? What is people's feedback on that, right? So that to me is the cons of being a developer. But if you're on the other side, like the founder I worked with, the really smart person who was not a coder, but was an entrepreneur, before everything was done, they actually would ask the question to themselves and the team. Okay, we want to build this. Great. We can build it. But why are we building it? Who are we building it for? Are there other solutions out there? If there are no other solutions, why are there no other solutions? Are we the first ones to discover this problem? Or did other people discover the problem and come to the conclusion that this is not worth solving, right? I mean, these
Yeah.
are phenomenal. I mean, I'm paraphrasing the type of questions I think I heard in those conversations, but this was the gist of what I took away from it, right? So that's how I would separate. You find what your skills are, and then you play to your skills. I mean, it might sound cliched, but it's very hard to stick to that box because you naturally gravitate to what you want to do. Like every day when I'm doing sales, like for an hour, I then keep looking at the repo and I start coding to the next feature, right? And then my wife pulls me back and she's like, "Why are you building more stuff? Right? Should you be building more stuff?" And now we come to an agreement that, okay, you know what? Yeah, maybe I'll build some part of the day. I'm going to build because your hands, your fingers need to. You're addicted to the IDE, right? You're addicted to executable code, and you don't get pleasure if you don't see the squiggly red lines of errors and you solve those errors. You feel like you're like MLK or Gandhi, or you feel great about yourself. Just
Yeah.
you're not doing anything anywhere close, right? I'm just saying I'm quoting those great people because you feel good about yourself, that as though you're doing some good or something like that.
Yeah. All right. So, going to the business part, while I was researching once more, I saw where you mentioned your Meta ad account getting hacked, and I've realized that has become really, really common of recent, especially this year. So, could you walk us through what happened and also how you responded and how
Sure.
businesses too, yes, can prevent that?
Yeah, it's it was extremely challenging. I'll tell you, this was, I've been using Facebook since they went live. I think when they were way before the days when people even knew of them. So I genuinely took a liking to their platform, right? So I was actually one of those really early adopters outside other platforms. I was like, Facebook kind of spoke the language to me in those early days. So when we started advertising, we spent a fair bit of money on Meta, on Instagram, and all of those platforms, right? Money that we would have otherwise spent in engineering. And if this sounds like a long-winded answer, hopefully hear me out and you'll know why I'm giving a little bit of this background, right? We spent some money on those platforms, so we had created campaigns and all of that kind of stuff. Now, Facebook, when you use Facebook.com or Instagram, right, to the end users, these tools are remarkably user-friendly and they're brilliant, right? There's no question about that. But when you start using the tools that are meant for businesses, like the campaign manager, for instance, it's not like Instagram. It's not like Facebook.com, right? It's
Yeah.
nowhere close, right? It's very difficult to use those tools because it's almost like, hey, if you're not our end user, it's okay for you to take the time to learn how our systems work. We don't want to make it super cool or something like that, right? So I took the pain. We took the pain as a company to understand those systems, and we invested right on advertising. So we were pretty much invested in Meta as a company. So we were using it for even our SSO, we have Facebook sign on our pages, right? Peter, you might have seen it. We have other social media sign-ins.
Yeah.
Facebook is one of them. So we have our company account for users signing in through Facebook as well. So we are, our integration with Facebook needs to work fine for our customers to be able to continue to use our systems if they happen to have logged in through Facebook, right? So getting hacked was not just my personal account got hacked, but it's the same account that I was using. Even though there's a company account, when you're signing in, it's pretty much the same credentials and whatnot, right? So when it got hacked, it was a serious problem. So we were in
Oh.
panic mode. We were trying to reach out to them. My experience, I'll give you the details, but it was, I'm sorry to say, hopefully if somebody at Facebook or Meta watches this, they take an opinion from some one of the people, right? It was a horrible experience. I don't know. I can't even use euphemisms or sugarcoat it. I got on a call with them on a Saturday evening, right? And it was the support is not, I believe, located in the country here. So I had to wait for like an hour or two, and there's no phone number to call. You cannot,
Wow.
even though you're a paying customer, there's nobody to call, and there's not even an email to send. You have to go through like Facebook Messenger and send these messages. But my account got hacked, and the hacker changed my password and kicked me out of the account. So I don't even have a way to log in. So how am I supposed to reach out to support if I can only go through the Instagram through Facebook Messenger, right? So it was like a chicken and egg story. It was a chicken and egg story. So I was trying to chase them down repeatedly, right? In the meantime, the hacker actually started leveraging our account, the ad account, and they placed an ad for $3,000 or something per
Wow.
day. We saw this as a small company. We stopped everything else we were doing, right? We were like panic mode, literally. And then we had to call the credit card company to stop, block the card essentially. But some of the charges had gone through. So we had to work with the credit card company, for instance. So the overall experience was so bad until the very end, Peter. They did not help us resolve the problem. It was like hitting a wall. It was literally like hitting a wall. Thankfully speaking, my co-founder also happens to have the account. We shared the account, so he was able to manage it. But there was still more complications in terms of accounts and roles and whatnot, because we have a Meta ad account and we have this other accounts, for instance. So the way the accounts are provisioned is not particularly intuitive. So the hacker had taken control of a lot of these pieces, but not all of them,
Wow.
thankfully. So we had to do a lot of damage control to make sure everything was intact and secure and whatnot. But I think for people, this is the advice I would give, right? I mean, you should do whatever you think you should do. But based on my experience, I would say I have two-factor auth enabled everywhere. But apparently, I had forgotten to do it on this Facebook account.
Oh.
I wonder if I had done just that one little thing, if all of these problems would not have occurred to begin with, right? So part of it is something that, as a company, you have accounts in 10 or 25 or 50 different places. So you forget where you've enabled this and where you've not enabled it. But that's something I think wherever we have to be able to enable, MFA, I think folks should actually do it, because you want to. And the second thing I would recommend is, if you're an independent creator, then there's more of a challenge. But if you have a partner, if you're a co-founder, and if you have other people who are part of your company, then you should at least make sure that every account that you have, make sure that the level of access that you have, that at least one other person that you trust and is part of the company actually has that level of access, because then there is actually a way for somebody to work with you. So, but even then, my co-founder, he had reached out to Facebook saying, hey, his co-founder's account was hacked. We are spending money. Can you put a block on something else? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. But they did not actually ever resolve the problem for us at all. I'm sorry to say, but that's literally what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the issue a lot of people have been having with Meta too. Have slow responses or no responses at all. And it's
Absolutely right. On the other side, like I can give you examples, like we work with Apple for other large companies, right? It's just amazing. I mean, I can't explain.
Wow.
It's much easier to get Apple support or to get a Google support, for instance. All of these other much bigger, equally bigger, probably much bigger companies, right? So I think there is work that certainly Meta has to do there. I mean, for the life of me, I don't understand why they wouldn't have tried to have a path to a solution here. Here there are legitimate people. So, I'll add one more thing there. It asked me to upload my driver's license, right, to prove my identity.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. I try to do that. But you have to hold the license, and then, it grabs a photo of it, right? So it needs proper lighting and whatnot. So we did it like several times. It did not like what it saw. And I'm pretty certain it's AI making certain decisions, right? I'm positive a lot of this is AI making these decisions, and it's not making the right decisions, right? Not all the time. After a few attempts, it said that you tried too many times. Try after 1 week, like a whole week. We had to wait a whole week. So we tried after a whole week. Yeah, and then it took this. It's not like 1 day or 5 hours. Like, Apple iPhone, you get logged out. It says wait for 2 minutes, and you keep trying the wrong password. It says wait for 10 minutes, and then 1 hour, and it's incremental, right? It's not exponential. It starts out with wait a week, come back in a week's time or something. And we couldn't even I tried my passport, my driver's license. Wow. It did not accept any of that identification. Now this is, Meta is located headquartered in the US, and I was actually uploading US driver's license and US passport, right? If it cannot recognize the driver's license and a passport from a country where your company is actually headquartered, I only wonder how it's going to recognize passports and driver's licenses from, because, different parts of the world, for instance. My heart goes out to folks who end up being in the situation and maybe living in different parts of the world. Yeah.
honestly. All right. So for business leaders, one of the beauties of technology is that it has made things easier, faster, and more cost effective. So for those business leaders that are still relying on manual processes and on legacy systems, what's your advice for them to take that first step towards modernization?
Sure. And in that question, Peter, just so I answer it very specifically, is there an AI component, or is that question even before the advent of AI?
Yes, before the advent of AI.
Okay, because
And
there's two different
yes.
answers. So I'm just going to give you the slightly simpler answer, right?
Yeah.
So, and let me even take another concrete example. When you think modernization, right? In my mind, I thought, it's probably there are some agencies that could catch up or are slower in how they catch up to how things are happening, but private companies and organizations are going to be on their toes and make upgrades all the time, right? I realize that's not the case, because there is actually a place that sells, computers and all the electronic items, like lots of them, not too far from where I live. This is a
Yeah.
chain in the US, right? And I noticed that they are very popular. And when I purchased something at the store the last time, they were using like an operating system like DOS that they couldn't use a mouse with. So they had to use tabs. And this is in 2022 or 21 or something.
Wow.
And I was astonished. I'm like, is this for
Wow.
real? Right? Is this for real? Right? And then you realize technology upgrades are very expensive. They take time, they cost a lot of money, and companies can actually make things sound a lot scarier than they really might be, right? This is,
True.
it comes down to, credibility, honesty, and whatever else these other adjectives might be, right? If Peter is a non-technical person, if I'm going to help Peter build something, I need to be a very credible technical person to tell you what is right, wrong, or not so right or not so wrong, right? Now, what if I come to you, Peter, and let's say you're a doctor, or you're a musician or a lawyer, right? Somebody who's very accomplished, but not particularly tech savvy, because that's not your field of expertise, right? And you want to build something, and now start throwing all these jargons and terminologies and make things extraordinarily complex and say, Peter, it's going to take you 12 months and 15 people to get this done. You're going to be like, you know what? Things kind of work right now. They're not completely broken. So why not just live with it, right? That is a problem. But then there's a conflict of interest, right? Because sometimes the company making the solution is not coming to you directly. Maybe somebody else is presenting that solution to you. So there's a lot of middlemen in this picture, right? Possibly middle people
True.
in the picture. So the cost gets added on, and then companies don't choose to making those upgrades, right? But that's going to cost those companies in the long run. Now, there's no easy answer, but the simple answer is there is no choice but to making those upgrades. Now, let's say OS X releases these upgrades, right? Some people wait a while to pick up the latest upgrade. Some of us jump on it, like day one Apple releases an upgrade, we go update our operating system, and for instance, right? Every single time we've done that, I'll tell you, excuse me, our existing apps have to be ported to make adjustments and accommodations for those new Apple releases, right? And that's not necessarily easy, right? Like the latest version of iOS was like 17 or something like that. We had to update Xcode and do a number of things to actually make further changes to our mobile app, for instance. Now, you could say that even as a technology company, we could have kind of delayed and deferred the upgrade to a later point of time. But what happens then is, if you're running into bugs or some issues, and if you're looking for some help online from the community, from the tech community, you're not going to get help for previous versions of that particular software. So you have no choice but to keep up with the latest upgrades, right? And that's a very tiny, narrow example. But to me, that's no different for larger companies. I think automation is not a choice. I mean, it's something you got to have to do. Humans are going to cost more money, right? The population still continues to increase, so there are more people available. So you could argue, well, maybe since there are more people available, can I get stuff done for cheaper? That's not necessarily true, because the person who can help you at the time you need that help, in the location you need that help, and for the item you need that help with, may or may not be readily available. So they're going to charge you an arm and a leg to get the job done, right? So as a company, you have to keep chugging along. The pace at which you chug along to keep up with technology is completely left to you, the needs of your organization. But I think the simple answer is you cannot you cannot just turn a blind eye to it and say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about these upgrades. I'm going to, be dated, because it is going to come back and bite you, and it might sometimes be too late to fix it.
True. All right. So coming back to SnowPal, have you raised outside funding for the startup?
No, not at this point. At this point, we have not taken the effort to actually raise funding from outside.
All right. So what tips do you have for entrepreneurs who are bootstrapping their companies so they can last longer and get more value for their...
Right. So again, there's pros and cons of bootstrapping versus getting the funding, right? Now with bootstrapping, you don't have as much money as you need, not even close, but you have the luxury of making certain decisions, right? When you go get funding, you may not have all of that luxury, but you might have a fair bit of luxury depending on your funding terms and whatnot. But you have a lot more money to work with. So those are early decisions. If you went to a venture capitalist with an idea and I said, hey, I have a great idea, right? I would imagine the venture capitalist is going to tell me, Krish, get out. Or I wouldn't even get far enough for them to tell me to get out, because everybody has an idea, right? And I think a famous Dilbert strip from years ago, you may know this obviously, but I'm going to state it. It says, I think Dilbert gets up and he says, I have a fantastic idea, right? And then the question is, do you have the money to execute that idea? He goes, no, I don't have the money. Oh, do you have the technical know-how so you can implement that idea yourself? He goes, no, I don't have the technical know-how. So the next strip goes, if you have an idea but need not the money nor the technical know-how, in pure economic terms, what you have is called nothing, right? That's what you have, right? And I think it was brilliant, right? It was absolutely brilliant, because if you go to a VC with just an idea, unless you have proven yourself by previous actions and companies and exits, it's unlikely they're going to entertain you, and it's very understandable, right? So how close do you get to what you want to achieve before you go to a venture capitalist is the question, right? Now, in the last year or so, we've had some interactions with people about whether we should, look for funding, how should we go about it, and whether we want to be part of an incubator program and whatnot. But the thing is, those are compromises. By compromises, I mean, if you have a team of people who believe in a certain set of things and they are able to execute on those things, and if you have to take the time to look for funding, Peter, that's a full-time job in itself, right? I mean, you're going to have to take 6 months completely off from what you're doing to look for it. Now, if your company is structured in a way where you have engineers separated from folks who are able to do that, it's probably a little easier. But if you're a company that is pretty much full of engineers, then nobody seems to want to pick up the tab and say, I will go look for money, right? Everyone's like, hey, let's build this, let's build that.
Yeah.
And you keep chugging along and doing it. But you have to be, I don't know if one is a sweeter spot than the other. I'm not sure. But I feel like you got to be on one end of that spectrum. Either you have to be able to keep building it with little money or no money, or you have to pause and go get the money to build something, because we've built n number of things, right? And sometimes we try to figure out the cost that what did it cost us to build it, correct? What did we spend in terms of time, money, and effort? What would it have cost us to build the same thing if we got funding and actually had hired more people to get that same thing done? And sometimes the numbers are not sometimes, I'll tell you all the time, the numbers are completely disconnected, right? Entirely disconnected. So I think everyone has to find what their strengths are. If you have a fantastic skill in convincing investors and getting money, then that's what you might want to do, play to your skills. But if your skills are more building solutions, showing that they work, and then getting closer and closer to that end where the investors sort of start coming to you to some extent, right? As much as you are wanting to go to them, then that's the path you want. I mean, I don't know if any of them is the right or the wrong answer. It's just that what works for each of us is remarkably different, right? Because sometimes when you read these things online, it sounds like there's a prescriptive way of doing things. Just like everything else in life, there is no prescription at all, right? I mean, what makes one person happy, truly happy, may make the other person not so happy, right? I mean, you take two YouTubers, two of them that I watch almost religiously. One of them Mark Wiens is predominantly somebody who eats and he's amazing at that, right? But I have another YouTuber who's very, very good. He travels a lot. He's very shy to even eat in front of the camera, despite having like 4-5 million subscribers, right? Because that's not his skill. That's not his forte. Now, if
Yeah.
he tries to do what Mark Means does, it's not going to go well for him, is it? So I think you're going to have to find your strengths, find your weaknesses, see what makes you happy, and then draw a balance, because you certainly cannot do only the things that make you happy as a founder. I can guarantee you that. I cannot guarantee you anything else, but I can guarantee you that much, that it is going to test every facet of your ability. It's not going to let you live in a comfort zone. It's going to make you question the whole purpose of your existence every morning. And then 1 hour later, you find the purpose of that day's existence and you go forward with that, essentially.
Amazing. All right. So you integrate with platforms like AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, for your startup. So how do technical partnerships like this expand opportunities for startups?
Sure. So there's two parts to it, right? Like, for instance, we are not an AWS partner, meaning we don't go, you can become an AWS partner where you build solutions using AWS for yourself or other companies, and you go down the path, right? We actually consume AWS services for powering our systems, right? That's kind of where we fall at this point. But even when you do that, our APIs are published on multiple hubs, Peter. One of them is AWS Marketplace, right? Amazon has like 1/3, I believe, of the market share in the cloud world. So you certainly want to make sure you are on their platforms as well, right? At least it is not a bad idea to be on the platform for sure. So we are on AWS Marketplace, and when you get on the Marketplace, you can work with teams. Like, for instance, we work with somebody in the AWS Marketplace team who's an awesome guy, right? So he guides us through the process, right? He says, hey, this is how you guys should publish your APIs. This is how I've seen other companies do it, and it's worked for them. And you get some examples, and then you kind of you see what those companies are, what problems they are solving, which ones are similar to yours, which ones are not, and you try to draw some parallels from that, right? But on top of that, AWS has these events and summits and whatnot, right? I think the AWS event might be priced, and I don't know how expensive it is, but I went to an AWS summit in DC not too long ago, earlier this year. That's a great experience for people to get you. I mean, it's a free. It's unlike the reinvent where you have to pay, I believe, to get in. Here, the AWS summits are free of charge, right? At least we didn't have to pay anything here. So you are able to go there, sit in these sessions. Not all the sessions are hands-on workshops. A small percentage of them are. I think you should definitely sign up for those hands-on workshops, and just try to work. Like, we signed up for a machine learning workshop, right? We spent about 2 hours in it. Now, could you have done this sitting at home? Yes, you could have. But sometimes, you need that kind of exposure and the networking to see people, see what people like, what they don't like, how these sessions pan out. And then I think AWS has a community that you can be part of. So if you be part of the community, they let you present at these types of events. So you can sort of present yourself and your company. But that is also a dedicated effort. Like, we went to that summit, we came back, said, this is great. We should do a lot more of this, right? 4 months have passed. We've not found the time to go to any other event whatsoever, right? It's just, we haven't found the time. So there is also a time commitment, right? I think the biggest challenge in life is, it's all great, but you got 24 hours a day, right? How do you break that down to make the best use of that time? So, but I think if you want to partner, if you either want to be an AWS partner, but if not, you want to start leveraging their services, because if you have to, like, say we publish our API on the API gateway on AWS, and if you have to be on the marketplace, which is a different product of theirs, right? You're just selling it on the AWS marketplace, your software product, that is, they actually require that you use a certain number of their services. If you did not leverage any of the AWS services, I don't believe they let you onboard onto AWS marketplace, right? So that's how they bring money to their other services. So there's a fine line between leveraging a company to making your product better and having a complete vendor lock-in. Now, that's the tricky line, right? Now, I don't know how people find what the sweet spot is. Sometimes you could be standing on that line, and you might not even realize when you have crossed that line, and you've actually become locked in, right, into that vendor, which means every single thing you're going to now do is going to have to be AWS related, which may or may not be a great idea, because from an AI standpoint, my understanding from my reading so far is that AWS is actually lagging behind. So if you're only a pure AWS partner, you're only doing everything on AWS, how do you get the benefit of leveraging AI that's coming out of OpenAI, or now that Sam Altman may or may not be in OpenAI? We don't know as we speak. So if it's Microsoft, for instance, right? So you're going to have to make sure as a company, these are difficult decisions that you have to make and ask yourself, right? You're small, great. You have funding, you don't have funding, it doesn't matter. But these are important decisions. And some of them you cannot walk back on, right? It's almost like the Robert Frost poem. You're at the crossroads almost every morning as a founder, and you have to take the path. You take the road not taken. That might be great. Sometimes you have to take the road that is taken plenty of times. So it's just that, yeah.
All right. So earlier in the interview, you mentioned your co-founder. So I would like to ask, how did you pick or how did you find your co-founder, and how do you complement each other?
We had married each other, so it was easier. so it is a family in this example, it's a family co-founder. But I'll give you a more concrete example, because this may or may not be true for a lot of the people, right? So I'll give you a more definitive example. I've had a lot of friends reach out to me to ask to say, hey, can we collaborate and build something, right? It's just that the timing that they had reached out, we were already invested in SnowPal, and we were, we made quite a bit of progress. So it was very hard to carve out time personally for me to be invested in their ideas. But here is what my take is, right? If you have, you have to be able to trust anybody you work with. That's a given. But the co-founder is somebody you're going to have to be able to trust almost as much as you trust yourself, right? Because what I've heard becomes really difficult and tricky is these exit strategies. What if you're working with somebody, things are going great, but things may not always go great, right? You have to be with each other when things do not go great. And now if people decide this is not worth my time, or this is not going as expected, or maybe there's no market, there's no traction. If one person decides to bail out and the other person wants to stay, because I've talked to a lot of people like that, I don't think there's a happy ending there from what I understand. It is going to be pretty complicated, because either you have the solution already and then you figure out how to divvy this thing up, or you don't even have the solution. And if one person goes, let's imagine one person is phenomenally good in development, right, Peter? Let's say you are the engineer in the company. Let's say another person in this example is somebody who's not the engineer, but who's very, very good when it comes to finding investors, sales, and the whole gamut of those things. Each of you have a very unique skill, and that's how it should be when you're collaborating, right? What is the point in having two founders who have the exact same skill? That makes no sense, right? So you have to complement each other by having completely separate skills. But that's the good thing. But that's also a double-edged sword, right? Now the other person decides, or you decide, you know what, things are not going well, and one of them walks out. How good is an engineer without a salesperson? How good is a salesperson without an engineer, right? I don't know if there is a happy medium there, right? So I think you have to, now things change. People are going to change. The environment changes. So to say that there will not be an exit strategy, your co-founder is going to stay with you and stand the test of time till eternity. If it happens, great, but you can't go with that as the only option, plan A, right? There has to be a plan B. I think the plan B should be an exit strategy. What happens 3 months down the road, things don't go well? What happens 6 months down the road, things don't go well, right? So it seems like you don't want to jinx it, and especially if you're superstitious, you probably don't want to have these conversations. But you're going to have these conversations, right? Some of us are almost superstitious, not by choice, but by environment, right? Growing up in India, everything, we believe a lot in superstition. So a lot of this stems from there. So you're going to have to say, this is what my exit strategy is going to have to look like. And as long as you're on board with that exit strategy, it is still going to be inconvenient if it gets to that point. But at least you can eliminate a lot of the chaos and the confusion and the anger and the angst and whatnot by having a very clearly defined, documented, and notarized sort of exit strategy.
Amazing. So, for developers or architects who might want to start their own companies one day, what skills or mindsets would you advise them to develop to make this possible?
Great. First thing is, um, I'm not a motivational speaker. Every morning, I need somebody to motivate, my mind, if you will. But I think I self motivate myself as well, right? I know because you find these challenges, and there's it's inhuman, right? It would be a lie if a lot of us said we never have doubts about what it is that we do or how we
Mm.
do it or who we do that with, right? It's gonna happen, but you find your way out of it. Maybe you take a walk, you listen to a song, something that you like, and then you come back an hour later, you find that, it's almost like I play poker. I love playing poker. When you play poker, when you have a run of bad hands, it's a very typical poker trait where like, I'm not going to play this stupid game ever, right?
Yeah.
Every poker player has said this, right? 30 minutes later, they grab dinner and they're back at the table there, right? Because you actually like that game, right? So there's no regrets. That's the fundamental question. Do you genuinely enjoy what you do? Like I genuinely, thoroughly enjoy building this company, right?
Yeah.
Every ounce of what I do, Swami Vivekananda, which one of the Indian, from many years ago, one of the things what he said was, when you want to do something, I'm paraphrasing what he said, so I'm going to do a terrible job. But the essence of what he said was, every nerve in your body, right? Every ounce of blood has to feel for that item that you're honestly committed to doing. You have to give it your very best. And you can only give it your very best if you actually like doing what it is that you're doing. And it doesn't matter whether you're good, bad, or terrible at that, right? Hopefully you're great. If you're not great, hopefully you're good. If you're not good, hopefully you're average. If you're not average, hopefully you want to learn from the bad to work your way to the great, right?
Yeah.
But does not matter what your skill sets are at that point of time. Your interest, energy levels, and the enthusiasm you cannot lose that, because that's the only thing that's left. The day you lose your enthusiasm for what you're doing, then I think that's a slippery slope, right? So I think
Mm.
for anybody, no matter what age, no matter where, which location, no matter what money you have, there's a quote that says, "Do what you can with what you have at this point of time." Right? Don't
True.
wait for that great day. Don't wait for somebody to give you $1 million. Don't wait for somebody to say you're the best or somebody to trust in you. It doesn't happen. We live in a world. We are 8 billion people. I think we're going to get to like 11 billion people. Nobody has time to encourage everybody, right? So you're going to
True.
have to
True.
find that motivation in yourself and find people that motivate you outside of your field. Like I find motivation almost exclusively, almost outside even my industry, I should say, right?
Wow.
When you see somebody like, I quote these YouTubers, right? Their lives are not easy. It looks glamorous. They're traveling, seeing the world, meeting people. I can only imagine how difficult it is to get used to food in every part of the world, get used to cultures. What if you're an introvert? What if you don't want to talk to people? What if you don't know how to edit the software? What if you don't know how to hold a camera, right? But you still take the camera, stick it in your face, and then you talk day in and day out and create this content, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you go back and look at great creators, even on YouTube, you go back 10 years, Peter, you will be like, this is horrible. The content was terrible, right? But they've made those adjustments, right? They've made those changes. Now, there are people who have millions of subscribers. There are people who don't, right? But it does not matter, right? You're going to have to do things the best way possible, as though, God is watching you, right? You know what I mean? Like, forget
True.
everybody else. What if God came and inspected my code from yesterday? It may not be perfect code, but can I say that I wrote the best code I was capable of writing yesterday? If I can do that, then I have no guilt feelings. But if I wrote code that was not as good as it could have possibly been, I think then you have to answer to yourself. I mean, that's the most difficult person to answer to, right? I think pleasing,
True.
I tell my clients, Peter, I tell them, I don't know if I can please you. I'm not even going to try to please you because that's not my job. I'm going to try and please myself, right? That's my job. Now, I've seen over the years that by pleasing myself in doing the best I could possibly do, in whatever it is I'm having to do, it has actually made my clients happy, right? That's all I can
True.
tell you. But I cannot tell you that I'm setting out to doing the opposite, right? Because you can't satisfy everyone's expectations. You need like 3 lifetimes to satisfy your own expectations. You know, some of us need like 10 lifetimes to satisfy our own expectations because we're like, oh, I could have done better. What did I do wrong, right? But that's all right. I think so. I would say if you want to do it, just do it. Do not let people discourage you because I will tell you when we started to build a web application with all the features, we went to look for helps. We want to do some of it ourselves, some of it we want to get help. Almost everybody told us that no, you can't do it. It's too much work. It'll take 18 months, a lot of money doing. You can't do it. We did it, and we want to build a mobile solution, Peter. Exact same answers. Oh, you want to do it for Android and iOS? You have a small team. Are you crazy? You can't do this. Just drop a lot of your features, right? We were like, no, we don't want to drop any features. We got, and the story hasn't changed even till today. Every single time we pick up to do something, if we were to ask somebody, they, I'm not saying they're wrong or right. It's just because they don't know how good or bad you are, right? It's you got to be your
Yeah.
own judge. So you want to make sure you ask the right questions. You don't ask questions that you should not be asking other people, right? You ask them what worked, what did not work, and what advice they might give themselves for doing things differently today. And then you work with that advice, right? That I think was the best way to possibly learn from somebody else.
Amazing. All right. So if you look back at your career, you go back to the beginning of your career, what advice would you give to your younger self to get where you want to be faster?
I would tell my younger self that I should have taken more risks. I should have taken more risks sooner than I ended up taking those risks. I should not have waited for the best time and the most opportune time to doing whatever it is that I wanted to do
Mm.
because there are no regrets, but if you have to tell your younger self, there are things you most certainly would, right? I would be like, you know what? Do not wait for this, that, and the other to happen, right? A lot of times you're at the mercy of everything else that's going on. Like, some of it, you have to make those conscious decisions, right? When I migrated here, I was pretty young. But when you pick up a job, you have to go through the visa process, right? You have to go through, and that's immigration is not fun anywhere in the world, right? It just takes a lot of
True.
time, a lot of energy, a lot of sacrifice. And then, you have to ask yourself, was this for you? Was this not the right thing, for instance, right? So there are pros and cons with every approach, and you have to make some sacrifices. So immigration is going to take time if you're going to immigrate. Now, if you do immigrate, then you follow the process, you follow the laws, you go through the process, and once you do immigrate, then you have time that you own, right? Till then, you don't have time that you own, unfortunately. I'll tell you that much. But if you're actually not doing that, then you have a bit more years. Like for me, some of my early years were spent in the process of immigrating, right?
Wow.
That took the time. So that's something I cannot change, and that's all right, completely all right. But the other things where I was waiting for, hey, should I quit? I used to work for Oracle, and Oracle was like one of the biggest companies at that time, right?
Yeah.
Years ago. They're pretty big now, but they were very big at the time. So making the decision to quit Oracle to move to work with other smaller companies was a very difficult decision for me, right? I'm like, is this the right thing to do? Am I taking and I don't shy away from risks at all. But even for me, it took many offers to quit the job to pick up the next one to go to a small organization. Now, in hindsight, would I wanted to do things differently? Maybe, maybe not, right? But I think delaying something is not a solution. You know what I mean? Problems are not going to resolve themselves. You are going to have to take that initial steps, right? So if
True.
somebody tells you, oh, you know what? You're too young, you can't do it. You're too old, you can't do it. You're too big, you can't do it. You're too small, you can't do it. You're whatever, right? Whatever people have to say. I think you should just ignore all of it, right? Ignore all of it. And you got to just, if you're writing code, write code. You're drawing diagrams, draw diagrams. If you're selling, go sell it. Living well, as they say, is the best, sweetest revenge, right? So, we got to try and do our best to live well. I think all of us have a beautifully unique skill. Now that is unique, right? They say, right, you can't judge an elephant by how fast it climbs a tree.
True.
Now, the problem with the education system, which probably could be a different podcast altogether, is a whole different story. But I think it kind of judges people into thinking they are not as good as they can be, or probably they are better than they should be, right? So I can
Yeah.
tell you personally, I went to college. I spent many years in college, and I went to one of the schools in India, colleges that's ranked pretty high. But personally, to me, it didn't make sense. When people tell you that, hey, you went to study there, that must be cool, or you must be smart, or whatever. I'm like, no. First of all, I don't personally believe, and I every day I believe I wish I had more intellect or something, right? But outside of that, I think, in my opinion, colleges or schools or companies or brands take credit for your existing intelligence. I don't know how many of them make you more intelligent. I'm sure some of them do, but the majority of them are just branding you, right? Oh, Peter, you went to Oxford. You're awesome, right? I think Peter is still awesome, even if Peter did not go to Oxford. I don't
True.
think Peter needs to go to Oxford to become better, for instance, right? Oxford, I'm sure, is awesome. I'm just randomly picking a school.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that people are going to judge every single day. I think this is just the way human mind works. As much as we are not expected and not supposed to judge people, we are judging. We are like judging people all the time, right? Half the lifetime is wasted judging other people. So you know what? You judging me, it's your problem. You know what I mean, right? Why do I
Yeah.
care? So if you're out of college, you're in school, do it today. Whatever it is that you planned to do yesterday and you were scared to do it, you write that first line of code, and then you tell me that you're scared anymore. You're not going to be. You'll be like, you know what? Oh, that code executes.
It was
And
not
I'll
that
give you
bad.
and I'll give you a simple example, right? After 8 years in college, I picked up my first job, and my DBA at the time, she asked me to write a line of code, which was creating a synonym in Oracle at the time, right? It was a very simple one-line command. Even that one-line command, Peter, there was a file that had 40 synonyms. So I had to add the 41st synonym, right? So all I had to do in VI was do copy, and then paste it and change the name of the synonym. I
Yeah.
did that. I committed the changes. The PR process was all different at the time, right? Committed the changes, it got approved. And then in the meeting, she called out for my contribution to that file. Something that would have taken her like 2 seconds to do. She taught somebody out of college. She made me do it. And I would be eternally grateful to Gina, right? Her name was Gina. So you need to make sure you are with, there are a lot of good people. Maybe some people are not so good, but the world is full of great people, right? So you just want to hope that there's somebody who judges you lesser and kind of helps you along the way, right? A little bit of help, which is why when we create these, I create these podcasts, we post these courses online and stuff like that. The whole idea is you should have to spend $2,000 to pay for courses, right? You should spend $5 to pay for courses, for instance. That's the whole idea. Now, again, like I said, not all of us are working for a social cause, right? We are a for-profit organization. But even the tiny little things we do, helping somebody, helping them, guiding them on some things, or
Yeah.
teaching them tiny things, or getting for an hour and helping them get started with whatever it is that you're doing, even those small acts make you feel like you're great or something, right? You know what I mean? It gives you that real pleasure that, okay, you know what? I was able to teach somebody. I was able to, get them that slightly better job. I was able to get them to do things that are not that difficult, because sometimes you see these YouTube videos and you see people do jobs that are so difficult, and you're like, you know what? I wish I could. There needs to be engineers. Then I don't have other skills, but I say, can I teach like some creative, coding or non-coding or software related stuff to folks, so they can enhance their careers and opportunities, and everybody gets to live that ever so slightly better life, right? I think
Yeah.
if we do that, I think building a company is one part of it, but making sure that the company being built is useful along the way to other people, I think is a win already, right? It's not just the money that you produce at the end of that journey, but it's the people that you've kind of worked with and inspired along the way in small ways, forms, or shapes, and showing your mistakes too, right, Peter? I make it a point to show every mistake I make in my recordings and videos and podcasts, because when I'm coding, I want to see that it's okay to make mistakes. He could be coding for
Yeah.
20 years and he can make, because sometimes you watch these recordings and people come super prepared. And when I used to watch those things as a kid, right, I'm like, oh my God, this person is like a genius and I might never be that any day, right? And then you realize, you know what? Most people are smart, but geniuses, maybe not, right? So, I mean, it's all right to making these mistakes. And when people see you make the mistakes in real time and they see that you have a product out there, I hope it gives them the comfort that, oh, Krish is just an average developer, and if he can do it, I can do it, right? I think that would be the best compliment I can possibly receive. Yeah.
True. All right. So I've had fun chatting with you today. If the listeners want to reach out to you, probably they want to learn more from you, or they want to work with you or connect with you, how was the best way for them to reach you?
Sure, they can hit me up on LinkedIn, right? That's one way to reach me. That's probably the best way to connect with me, because I don't use social media outside of that as much. LinkedIn is a tool I've loved from day one, for instance. So that would be one way to reach. I have YouTube channels, for instance, so they can obviously reach out to me through those channels, and I can even give you my email if they want to reach out. But sometimes with email, you got to be careful. That's why I'm a little bit hesitant in sharing that. I think LinkedIn at least tells me, hey, this is who they are, and then you can
Yes.
connect, right? So I'm more than happy to connect with people and do the little I can do. Yeah.
All right. So once the show goes live, we'll link your LinkedIn on the video and in the show notes for those listening on audio.
Absolutely. And then the podcast, the technical podcast, I can give you the couple of links. That way, if people want to learn from it, they can just check it out on. I mean, it's published to multiple places, but I watch it typically on like Apple, but it's available on other platforms as well.
All right. So what was the name of the podcast?
It's the name of the company, but I'll give you the name. I don't know if the name of the company is different. I think it's Web and Mobile App Development, but I don't know if that's the exact name. But it's a combination of those words, and it's the name of the company is like SnowPal, and there's a big yellow logo and stuff like that.
No problem. So it will be linked to in the final products.
Yeah, and then if they go to like snowpal.com, I think a lot of these links are there on that page as well. So, that's one place. If they forget everything else, they could go there. That way, the podcasts are not just coding related, just so you know, it is all facets of software development, right? It could be campaigns, setting up campaigns. It could be creating videos for advertising, writing articles, everything that we have to do collectively to sort of sell our product with the company and the services. So the podcast sort of walks you through those types of things.
Amazing. All right. So thank you so much for coming on the Tech Your Business podcast today and sharing with us and chatting with us and sharing so much wisdom today.
Well, no, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully you find that this is of some value. And if you do, and I hope you do, it was awesome to chat with you, right? So I'm hoping we can connect back on a different one at a different point of time.
Definitely. And for the listeners, I'm sure you've learned something. For those of you who are technical founders, you've learned how to prioritize, how to sell, how to balance things out. And for everyone else, for those who want to build, you've picked up something too. So thank you so much for listening, for being with us on this episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. Till next week when we are here with another episode, don't forget to keep taking your business. Bye for now.